A while back, I started studying stand-up comedy to relieve some of the pressure applied from the mental health services, the social services, the free stuff, the counselors, their psychologists, social workers, the reviews, the applications, the appointments, the tender, loving emotions, and the restrictions for the hands to make sure they don't get too much power or control and start to pray for suicide. To eliminate their paranoia. I walked by this truck full of Hispanic Mexican men today, laughing, staring at me. A lot like Arizona. Not indirectly, but observing and watching, and indeed shaking their heads as I walk by to let me know they are aware. The attention in this system with these processes takes so much effort. Food doesn't even taste like calories anymore. The hot doesn't even warm the body. These people are so worried about cholesterol. They're so worried about their health and medicine standards. They now test for hormones and other biological necessities they see on their screen. They take notes. And they have meetings with their coworkers, buddies, supervisors, managers, landlords, in the city, leaders, and the governor of the state of Washington in the Pacific Northwest. There's been a decision for tribal and primitive biological chemistry and the traditional notion in psychology of behavior, and within psychiatry, reward, stimulation, and as a whole, success and achievement. Everybody's been cured. Nobody ever has to work again now. In other words, go home, enjoy the mystery where all of your possessions and your refrigerator came from now. Ignore the bank account and just go protest now. Share what you have with thy agreeing follower. And nobody ever goes hungry anymore. There's no poverty. Suffering will only be for people like me now, who don't agree with their methods, their practice, and their strategy and tactics for the goal they want and need, and are making conscious This world I'm describing, this city I'm talking about now, and this part of the city I'm in now called Capitol Hill, are run by people led by warriors, Marxists, anarchists, and survivalists. They have decided on the eyes and the ears in two different parts of the cerebral cortex. And any other part of the human body and any kind of thinking or thought have to do with mental capacity, the mind, and the cognitive benefits available when someone meets the standards and doesn't go past the limits. An animal provided certain freedom, in other words. Allowed to have a name, allowed to say, as long as there's time, and energy supplied by the workers, the builders, the creators, artists, musicians, philosophers, and their doctors, and their teachers, and their professors, and the instructors' assistants. Tick tock. Are incoherent within this great nation they call planet Earth. Totally wrong, totally confusing, and most of all, belligerent. Therefore, I would not be eligible for the mushrooms. I would only be allowed and privileged to buy a small, tiny bag of their weed and their marijuana with a pot smell. I'll never have children in this world. I'll never have a family. For the rest of my life on this earth now, I will, I pray, build a spaceship, a rocket to take me into outer space and away from this language and letters and writing and grammar and linguistics. Keeping all the parts moving correctly. And allowing joy, heartfelt happiness and bliss. But not too much. Not too long, and not for too many years now. So I started studying stand-up comedy after I had my chordoma tumor removed. Mostly because I studied with an Iranian professor in college who I freaking loved. I cherished and adored. Wanted to study with for my PhD, but he ended up leaving to Saudi Arabia, teaching communications. He wrote me letters of recommendation and introduced me to the great and the powerful and the strong and the elegant Frankfurt School. The philosophers and the ideology speaking, genius, intelligent, high IQ, masterful, Karl Marx, Antonio Gramsci, Theodor Adorno, in psychology with Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. And I went to the library when I wasn't studying for a test and I wasn't writing a 20 to 30 page paper for my class to get a grade. I read from beginning to end, just before I got to studying law and justice to be a lawyer. And moved in a different direction when I got to B.F. Skinner and I started to hear about pigeons and rats and monkeys and CIA experiments with humans in prisons who were African American, addicted to heroin, and given their acid and shot up with a needle in their arm to keep them relaxed. And the hippies who took this material I talk about now and applied what they learned to the colleges and the universities, the University of Washington, Harvard, Berkeley, and have led a revolution now for nearly 50 years, almost to its conclusion, of violence and anarchy and destruction, murder and killing kids, children getting shot with their parents, mothers and fathers dead, all because what they spoke and what they said were much more loud than Krishnamurti, than Edward Said, and a man who sat in the Holocaust and chose not to stare at a wall and come out and write psychiatry books, Viktor Frankl. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Dr. Martin Luther King, in the tradition of spirituality. The only way to change a system has to do with being the change you wish to see in the world. And in order to say, I am that, now must be silent and quiet and peaceful. And lastly, the stand-up comedy joke.